Hello world, it's me, Briar, and my co-host, Frere Bear. Hello, baby. There we go. Beautiful girl. So, welcome to the first impressions of HEAB, or as I call, House of Earth and Blood. Spoilers for the first 165 pages. First and foremost, let's get that out of the way. I was originally planning to film a first impressions on Tuesday when I got through the kind of prologue chapters of this book. Life kind of kicked me in the teeth. There was a very big upheaval that I have not fully processed yet. And I'm still kind of upset about it. So, I haven't read nearly as much as I wanted to read, but we're getting through it. One page at a time, I suppose. So, first and foremost, again, spoilers for the first 165 pages. Should not be much of a big deal. We're going to get into the things like the little quibbles. I'm not sure they're flaws just yet, but they are quibbles, I guess. And then we're going to talk about the things that I like, which are significantly more than the things that I don't entirely like. And then we're going to talk about my predictions for the story, where it goes from here. So, let's get into it. First and foremost, there have been a couple of things, and this isn't fully a quibble. It's more of my eyebrow is arched because I'm keeping an eye on this. So, some of the language around sex workers so far in this book is just, it kind of raises an eyebrow because very similar language has been used to shame sex work in the past. Like, this anger that this one character is being mistaken for a sex worker, and the aggression and, that comes from her friends or people who are romantically interested in her. And then later on, Bryce is like, oh, I actually hold a lot of respect for sex workers most of the time, and then a little bit of pity the other part of the time. And it's just like, I get the intention here. I feel like Sarah's intention here is to subvert some of the thinking around sex workers, as well as to world build the opinions of sex workers. But unless this actually goes somewhere, I would advise against it, personally. I would advise bringing sex work up in that kind of context. And again, this is a personal thing. I'm not saying that this is the way of the world or this is what you should do. Obviously, Sarah does not need any advice from some random weirdo who's going to be bald in a couple of days off the internet. She has quite the amount of books under her belt. So this is just a personal thing for Briar. Briar Brain doing Briar Brain things. Secondly, the use of male and female just kind of stands out as annoying to me. Like, it's not a deal breaker. I'm still into the book. I'm still into the vast majority of the prose. It does stand out, though. For example, on page 155, that girl. Bryce had always been that girl, or the girl, to their father. Rune hadn't heard the male speak her name in 12 years. Just say him? Just say him. Because there have been a couple of other times, like male and female, the way that they take me out, because the wording is just a little bit jarring, because everything else feels natural, and then that just kind of takes me out of the moment. Because there are other times that I've highlighted it. I'm not going to look at every highlight. Because some of these are me just interacting with the thing. Yeah, so I don't know. It's just it's kind of standing out as a little bit jarring right now. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't use male and female in order to kind of establish like the society or world build here. I'm just saying that when you do stuff like that, when you try to subvert usual language patterns in order to say something about your world, there's a lot of cons, there's a lot of pros. Because it's a good world building tactic, first and foremost. It is a good world building tactic. I am not saying that Sarah J. Maas is making a mistake here. I'm just saying that it kind of takes me out a little bit. And that's just one of the cons that you're going to have to deal with if that is how you want to establish your world building, through like little language quirks, little turn of phrase that don't completely jive with people because we're used to our world turn of phrase and idioms and the like. I think that is a very smart way to world build, a very natural way to world build. You're just occasionally going to run into problems where people are just like, what? You know? And again, these are not like full-on cons. I don't think I'm far enough in the book to find any full-on cons. These are just kind of eyebrow raisers and things to keep an eye on, basically. So let's move on to the things I like. I think chapter 5 is the peak of the book so far. I really liked chapter 5 and chapter 6, the aftermath of chapter 5. I think those were really well constructed, really well written, and it was just, excuse me, and it was genuinely a well crafted couple of chapters. Secondly, I like Bryce. I like following Bryce. I think, you know, the fun party girl that we got introduced to in chapter 6 is a really interesting contrast to the kind of quietly snarky and evasive person we get chapter 7 onwards. So I really like how the trauma is being explored. Bryce is trying to forget it, trying to move on with her life, and the grief that completely resurfaces when it turns out that the person that they thought murdered Danika did not murder Danika. So I like how that's being handled so far. I think that's a genuinely interesting train of thought to follow. I don't know how I feel about Hunt. I haven't made up my mind. Like one line to me kind of stood out as just like, you know, let me see if I can find his chapter because that pissed me off. I forgot to mention that one line, just like, let me see if I can find it. Okay. Page 121. Hunt's point of view. He'd admit it. Males would do a lot of fucked up things for someone who looked like that. Let me read just to give you a little bit of context. Let me move up a few paragraphs. Hunt could have sworn Bryce's shoulders sagged slightly. She said, Maximus Tertian is dead. They nodded. She angled her head. Who did it? That's what we're trying to figure out, Isaiah said neutrally. Hunt had heard of Tertian, a creep of a vamp who couldn't take no for an answer, and whose rich, sadistic father had taught him well, and shielded him from any fallout from his hideous behavior. If Hunt was being honest, Midgard was better off without him, except for the headache that they'd now have to endure when Tertian's father got word that his favorite son had been killed. Today's meeting would just be the start. Isaiah went on. You might have been able to You might have been one of the last people to see him alive. Can you walk us through your encounter with him? No detail is too small. Bryce glanced between them. Is this your way of feeling out whether I killed him? Hunt smiled slightly. You don't seem too cut up that Tertian's dead. Those amber eyes slid to him, annoyance lighting them. He'd admit it. Males would do a lot of fucked up things for someone who looked like that. I just don't think that's a necessary statement when we're talking about a murder, and somebody kind of on the raised eyebrow list, not official suspect, but the raised eyebrow list, because she was sexually harassed by him and probably would have been sexually assaulted had her brother not been there. That's just a weird thing to put in that book, because even though Hunt doesn't understand the full situation, Sarah does, and that's just a little bit of a weird thing. That, to me, genuinely is a flaw that I forgot about until I brought this up, because that's just a... And I don't know how I feel about Hunt because of it. Like, he'd admit it. Because yes, I understand that is not Sarah saying that people are at fault when they are assaulted. But it is saying that, oh, you're assaulted because of your looks, to a degree. Whether Sarah intends that to be kind of the message of that line or not, that kind of comes through there. That interpretation can absolutely be made, and it would be backed up by the text. Fiction is not in a vacuum. Fantasy is not in a vacuum, and despite what the TikTok book girlies want to say all day, up and down, books are political, whether the author intends them to be or not. I know that this is a positive thing, but like, I just had to go on a tangent about that because that was very much the ick. The you know that meme that brother you know, very much that meme right there. Anyway, let's move on, because I'm genuinely going to get miffed, more than miffed, if I continue to talk about this. More things that I like. I like a lot of the character dynamics, aside from Hunt. I am undecided on Hunt. I want to give Hunt a chance. I do. But I am undecided so far. He's going to... Because Connor... I liked Connor. Genuinely. I was sad to see him go. And Connor at first was just like a little bit forceful for my taste. But because we read that Bryce was kind of being flirtatious and intended to be flirtatious, like she wasn't just talking to him, like very much she was attracted to him, and like subtly let it be known that she was attracted to him. It did take kind of some of the edge off of what he was saying. And I think they could have potentially had a good relationship. And then he died. And I was just like, oh no, not Connor. First of all, Sarah, how dare you make me care about somebody named fucking Connor? That is my brother's middle name. And that is the name of one of my most prolific bullies in school. So how fucking dare you, Miss Ma'am? And then after you make me care about this little Connor, you kill him off? Rude. 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 Anyway, so I do think that for the brief amount of time Danika and her pack were here, Sarah does a good job of introducing a familiarity between Bryce and them before she kills them off, and she gives a little bit of space for that impact to linger long after they're gone. So kudos to Sarah. Like, Sarah, after all of the things that I heard, I'm like, oh wow, this is not a competent writer. I was wrong. I made an assumption and looked like an ass. Regardless of story directions or story decisions, I do think that Sarah has skill as a writer. So I can see why she's published, even if I would not agree with all of the story decisions that she goes with. So far, I have reason to believe that she's competent and she does deserve to be published. I have not fully decided on some of the characters. I do like Isaiah's introduction, how sympathetic he was and how fair he was to Bryce. I really like that about Isaiah. And then you have Hunt coming in kind of like a callous asshole, and I'm just like, I don't care about you. I don't care. Dick. Get... So I think Hunt is kind of a dick, and he's gonna have to earn my I don't know if I would rather Bryce be with Isaiah than Hunt, personally. So far, I could change my mind later on. Hunt might grow on me. So far, I don't like Hunt. It's more of a neutral feeling. I don't hate Hunt. I don't dislike Hunt. I don't like what I see so far, but I haven't formed an opinion beyond neutral eyebrow raised. Like, I've got my eye on you. You know. So, moving on to my predictions. So, there was this little entity in chapter 6. Let me see. Oh no, it was chapter 7. Not chapter 6. I'm sorry. So this little entity in chapter 7. Page 90. Bryce lifted her head, peering up towards the carved bone gates hewn from the ribs of a long-dead leviathan who'd prowled the deep seas of the north. The mist swirled tighter, the temperature dropping, announcing the arrival of something ancient and terrible. Bryce remained kneeling, bowed her head. She was not welcome at the sailing, so she had to come here to say goodbye, to give Danika this one last thing. The creature that dwelt in the mist emerged, and even the river at her back trembled. Bryce opened her eyes and slowly lifted her gaze. Sarah? What is that? What is that? Are we getting like a warlock moment? Is Bryce pledging something to this unknowable entity that she doesn't know she's pledging? Did Bryce... Look. There's a lot of emphasis on the drop, right? A lot of emphasis on the drop. Danika and Bryce were going to make the drop at 27. Okay, Briar Brain is Briar Braining. All gears turned all the way up. All right, I feel personally, if I had to make a prediction, Bryce is not going to make the drop in the traditional fashion, if she hasn't made it already. Not in the traditional fashion. I'm wondering, just a little spark. Did this entity drop Bryce into immortality? Did this awaken her immortality and make her forget about it? That is my first prediction. Secondly, even before I reached the chapter where they were like, oh yeah, Briggs is still in prison, but Maximus was killed in the exact same way. I didn't think Briggs did it for a fucking moment. Okay? You think, okay, look, let's find the passage of where it's talking about how fucking powerful Danika is. Because I highlighted that shit. I'm just like, you think the Fae are gonna let a wolf have powers that rival the fucking Autumn King? Absolutely not. So I'm not saying it was the Fae. I'm not saying it was any of the Oxes. Or Oxes. Where the fuck is it? I highlighted it. I could have sworn I highlighted it or made some kind of note. Okay, so page 22. Page 22. Yet while Bryce would inherit barely enough power to do cool party tricks, Danika was expected to claim a sea of power that would put her ranking far past Sabine's, likely equal to that of Fae royalty, maybe even beyond the Autumn King himself. And I wrote, no one's letting a shifter reach those heights. Be so for real. Because, like, you can expect hierarchies in a lot of these books. Like, a lot of fantasy books have the hierarchy trope. And a lot of times, wolves are not at the top of that hierarchy. Werewolves, lycanthropes, shifters, generally kind of lower to the bottom of that hierarchy. And just the way that it's, like, written. So the houses, the structured houses, for me, how I interpreted it, I'm so sorry if I'm wrong, but, like, you have House of Earth and Blood, and that is the shifters, humans, witches, ordinary animals, and many others to whom Cathona calls, as well as some chosen by Luna. Alright, humans, ordinary animals, witches, shifters. I feel like House of Earth and Blood is kind of on the lower end of the spectrum of power, personally, and this is just how this read to me. Because House of Sky and Breath, Malachim, angels, which seem to be at the top, Fae, elementals, sprites. Excuse me. They were, and with an asterisk, sprites were kicked out of their house as a result of the participation in the fall, and are now considered lowers, though many of them refuse to accept this. So House of Sky and Breath is top of the hierarchy. This reads, House of Many Waters, river spirits, myrrh, water beasts, nymphs, kelpies, nox, and other, watched over by Ogenis. House of Sky and Breath is favored by Luna, by the way. House of Flame and Shadow, Daemonici, reapers, wraiths, vampires, or vampires. I like vampires a little bit better. It's spelled with a Y, so I feel like it's vampires. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not going to care. Anyway, Draki, dragons, necromancers, and many wicked and unnamed things that even Erd herself cannot see. So I feel, just based on the little bit of lore that we get before you even start the story, and how haughty Fae are written, and even angels or Malachi, it might be Malachi, actually. I don't know. Whatever. How lofty and, like, full of themselves that the Fae and the Malachi are. It reeks of somebody in a higher position than Danika before she could make the drop, because they feared the kind of power that she could claim. Secondly, it is just too convenient that Briggs was caught after he was released early, because on a loophole. That loophole never mentioned. Not so far. It could be mentioned later. So far in the story, not mentioned. Nobody has said what the loophole is. I don't know what the loophole is. Okay. So convenient, though, that the pack who murdered him, or not murdered him, the pack who apprehended him is murdered when he gets released on a loophole and had been caught buying the supplies to summon the super powerful demon that Danika managed. Okay, not Danika. Okay, look. The reason I think this dark entity took an interest in Bryce, this bitch beat this powerful demon that slaughtered an entire pack of super powerful wolves that were already powerful before they made the drop. Okay, and already some of the top enforcers in the city, Bryce, barefoot with her cut up feet and drunk and drugged up off her ass, beat this demon back with a fucking stick, while a Malachi soldier was laying dying at the demon's feet. You got me fucked up. It is somebody connected to Bryce. Okay, it is somebody connected. I'm hedging my bets. The Autumn King. The Autumn King killed Danika and her pack because Danika could rival him. And he was in league with Sabine. And that Sabine knew about it. That's why she was so angry, like beaten up against the glass, to get at Bryce, because she wants to throw them off of her trail. The Autumn King summoned that fucking demon, and Sabine helped, I feel. So, like, the Autumn King definitely did the magic part, but Sabine knew about it. They conspired. That is my current guess. If I decide to do a second, like, impression, then I might update it as details make themselves known. But then again, the Sabine thing might be too obvious. Sabine might be too obvious. So the current Shifter King, or leader, or whatever, is on his deathbed, and he is so benevolent, and he is only mentioned once. Perhaps he favors Sabine. Perhaps he wants her to take his place and not be challenged by her daughter. I don't know. I like the Sabine and Autumn King kind of conspiring together. I wonder. I don't think Micah's part of it, actually. Unless this is his way to get rid of Hunt, and that's why he sends Hunt to guard Bryce. I'm gonna have to see. I'm genuinely excited about this mystery. Genuinely so excited. Like, I don't know how I feel about Hunt, and he's gonna be the main, like, love interest. We're gonna be seeing a lot of him. I'm not super enthused about seeing a lot of Hunt, personally. I wanna know who the fuck this entity is. What if Bryce was genuinely in the wrong place at the wrong time, though? What if the initial murder wasn't even about Bryce, but the fact that Bryce beat back this demon with a fucking stick caught the entity's attention when she was at the funeral before the sailing, or at the aisle, or whatever, sending her last goodbyes to Danika? What if this demon that murdered Danika and the pack has returned 2 years later because the entity is setting something in motion to test Bryce? I wonder what that entity is. I still think that entity is going to have something to do with Bryce coming into her immortality. I think we're at a warlock situation with the entity and Bryce, personally. Just the way that it ended. Bryce opened her eyes and lifted her head. Bryce is at her lowest before this entity, raw and vulnerable. But she's also very much in an interesting position. The daughter of the Autumn King. And nobody knows about it. I'm gonna stick to my idea that that they made some kind of deal, and that Sabine and the Autumn King, possibly Micah, all conspired to get Danika out of the way, as well as her pack, and are having Bryce at the center of it because they want Bryce gone. Or maybe Sabine and Micah want Bryce gone because they see that she poses some kind of threat. Maybe Micah caught on that Bryce made some kind of deal with that entity that we see at the end of chapter 7. So other than that, I guess I'm just going to keep reading because there's a lot of intrigue here. It's very interesting. I'm having a good time with it. So I'll see you again, possibly for a second impression, or maybe the full book review, or to let you know I DNF'd. Whatever it may be, we'll see. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.